We've got 5 weeks of college football in the books. Time to check in with Steve Deace, Michigan podcast. Always appreciate that invitation we get on a regular basis to join Steve on Michigan podcast. It's a must see for, of course, Big Ten fans, but also national college football fans. Check out Steve's work, Michigan podcast. It's right here on YouTube and your favorite audio platform. Steve, what's going on today?
Just waiting for fall to finally show up here in the Midwest, man, with temps in the 90s. Other than that, I'm great. How are you?
See, I just got off the phone with a buddy who said the same thing. I'm the other guy. I'm the guy that will hang on to 85 degrees every day for the entirety of the year. That's fine with me.
Yeah, I'm ready for fall.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to size up Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State through 5 weeks. They're all unblemished as we expected. What do you see out of these three teams that maybe give you a lean in one direction or maybe contrary to what you thought a few weeks ago?
I think the thing that stands out the most to me is in 2 road games, Drew Aller's QBR is 30 points lower than it was in the 3 home games. And here's why that matters to me. The 2 road games are against Illinois, which I think has given up less than 400 yards of offense in a game, maybe once or twice this year, is nowhere near where it was defensively last season when it was number 1 in scoring defense in the country, number 3 in total defense in the country. And the other road game was Northwestern. So I'm a little concerned about that because I think these 3 teams, I think I told you before the season, I had Michigan and Ohio State power rated almost perfectly even, had like a half point on a neutral to Michigan. I had Penn State about a little more than a field goal behind Michigan and Ohio State, but I had all 3 of those teams like power rated double-digit favorites against everyone else on their schedules other than themselves. So clearly they're a tier apart from one another, and you're looking for contrast when they played this round robin that begins later this month when Penn State goes to Columbus. And I'm a big believer you can't hide your quarterback in college football. And I told you last year I thought Drew Aller should have played more high pressure, high leverage minutes. It wasn't the same thing that we did with JJ his freshman year where he played a lot in key moments. A lot of what Aller did last year was mostly mop up time. And I wondered, I told you all last year, I thought this was a 2023 team for Penn State, but with the quarterback, who's obviously a big time recruit, and we've seen him make some, show some big time arm talent, but would he be ready at the same time that the rest of the team is ready, if that makes sense, And when your margin for error is so slim with the other 3, I mean, right now, JJ McCarthy's number 1 in the nation in QBR, but Kyle McCord is 6th. Okay. So, we're really talking about 1 or 2 throws that you either should not make or must make that will determine all 3 of those teams' seasons when they play each other. And you saw this 2 weeks ago with Ohio State. Kyle McCord was not great against Notre Dame. He made one great throw when it mattered the most to get him down to the goal line to Emeka Egbuka there right in the final second. That's what I'm talking about. When we get to playing each other now, the rest of these games, this is like, a 1970s Big 2 and Little 8 kind of thing. When the rest of these teams can't hold the top 3 teams' jock straps. All right. So we're really talking about when Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, when they play their round robin invitational, whose quarterback will not make the 1 or 2 mistakes they can't afford, but will make the 1 or 2 big throws that must be made. And that's likely going to be the difference here because you can't hide your quarterback in college football. So that's kind of what stands out to me the most. Obviously, he'll get better as the season rolls on, but the margin for error against those other 2 teams is very, very slim.
Steve, what is your mindset watching an Ohio State Notre Dame game? Because I can't imagine that there are 2 programs on the face of the earth that you despise more.
For me, it's never been personal for me, really, with either one. Well, it was personal with me for Notre Dame for a while growing up because they beat us 5 straight years, and Lou Holtz was, as you guys learned, pretty annoying. But, then I got invited by one of my listeners who's a Notre Dame grad, and he's one of the ushers at the stadium on weekends. He has been for many years. He invited me to go to the 2004 Michigan Notre Dame game, and we lost that game, but I spent the whole day on campus. And you know how much I love the tradition and stuff of this sport, just a really special place. And so I don't have like the disdain for them that I used to. I've never really had disdain for Ohio State. I mean, I grew up in an era where there was a lot of mutual respect there, pre-social media. A lot of my disdain was for Iowa, and a lot of my family lived in Iowa, and Hayden Fry kind of had Bo's number there for a little bit. And then Mark D'Antonio, I was never a guy who hated Michigan State at all. Mark D'Antonio changed that. Okay. But to answer your question, it's a win for me either way. I'm totally relaxed. Everything's great. I mean, I win no matter who loses. I mean, that you can't ask for a better situation than that. It's the closest I'll ever get to feeling like an IRS agent.
That's a good angle on it. I had fun because for 6 or 7 months, I got annoyed with a Notre Dame fan, and I will put them in any other category. So this has nothing to do with, well, it does maybe a little bit, that it was Notre Dame, Ohio State, but fans that guarantee wins. Like, that's the most asinine thing that I like. What is the accountability quotient there? If you don't guarantee it, or if you don't come through with the victory, what's the penalty? You guaranteed a win. Like, I don't know what that's all about. I know that when I've heard that out of NFL players, I've thought, if I was an NFL head coach and one of my players guaranteed a win, their game check would be suspended until the final outcome of the game, because they guarantee the win.
Well, I don't want to reopen old wounds, but we once had a quarterback guarantee a win against you all, and that turned out okay, as a matter if I recall. But
yeah,
that was another time. Yes.
You couldn't have gone to Super Bowl III instead. You couldn't have used that example. Okay. So this Michigan football team looks like they're airtight. They took on a Nebraska team that's not good, but still they've got a relatively talented roster. Although you talk about quarterback issues, my goodness. And Michigan this was just a workmanlike, you go out, it's a business trip, we're going to blow you out 35-0 until anything, the rest of it doesn't matter. And they're just, again, airtight.
I was not happy, Mark, coming out of the non-conference. I thought it was really sloppy, unfocused. I thought it had a certain Rocky Balboa at Gold's Gym while the press is watching kind of a vibe. A lot of guys, I think, tried to make, highlight reel plays and were maybe too self-aware of how good they were supposed to be. And then, since we're not around these teams, unless you have the good fortune of covering them for a living, you're not around them the other 7 months out of the year. And so maybe you don't know everything that goes into a season. So you're not really sure why these coaches get paid all the money they do. Look at the way Michigan has played the first 2 weeks since Jimmy came back compared to the previous 3 weeks. And that's just a little bit of a hint as to why these guys make the stupid money that they make, because it does matter. Even if it's nothing more than, the final non-conference game against Bowling Green, Sharon Moore was the offensive coordinator, the offensive line coach, and the head coach. That's just way too much to put on one guy. And, and you've got 25 seconds in between to make every single decision in the middle of the game and adjustments and everything else that need to go on. Even if it's just nothing other than there's one guy there that allows all the lieutenants to run their battalions. And then if there's a big decision to be made every now and then, you go to the general and he makes it, and it gets filtered through the chain of command. And so it just makes what happens on Saturday's run seamless. But this has looked like a dramatically different football team compared to what we saw in the non-conference. It looks exactly like what a lot of us anticipated heading into the season. It is a team without a true, absolute attack you there weakness. And when you look at who was coming back, the development of J.J. McCarthy with an entire off season now where he didn't have to sit last season, rest that arm as he did a year ago. He didn't throw until I think it was after June 1 last year. And then he was still involved in a starting quarterback competition with Cade McNamara, remember. And so this is the first full offseason. He's had all the starters reps. He's been totally healthy. You see the difference, except for the Bowling Green game. He's had a QBR of 90 or higher in every other game so far this season. I think they, the one question mark was how long it was going to take the offensive line to gel to get to the elite status that it was forecasted. And Ladarius Henderson was somebody they went after right away in the transfer portal. But Michigan's transfer requirements are not easy to appease, and so he was not able to come in the spring. He didn't come in until this summer. Took him a while to get acclimated. He still had a couple of pressures that he gave up on Saturday against Nebraska. But if you watch that offensive line there now with Carson Barnhart at his more natural right tackle position, that just now looked like a Joe Moore level of offensive line. I mean, they just absolutely destroyed a Big Ten front. And then you look at on the defensive side, Mark, this is the least amount of blitzing I've ever seen a Michigan football team do in except back in the old bend but don't break era of the 80s, growing up with Lloyd Carr as our DC. Now we're going back a ways. They're not blitzing that much at all. And we know they have some very aggressive blitz packages, not anything like what Don Brown was doing when he was blitzing 50% of snaps. But I mean, it's ruthless is the way I would describe the last 2 weeks. And that's key because Michigan's basically playing against itself until we get to November. That's just the reality. And they're playing against themselves. And so you can't, I'm not a believer that you can just turn it on and turn it off. I think there are a few exceptions when you can do that. I watched the Fab Five do that a few times growing up, but you're talking about one of the most talented teams in college basketball history. Most of the time, you have to maintain an intensity level. And I wonder if this season ends up going the way that we hope, I think we might look back at the end of the year and realize that Jimmy being suspended those 3 games was a blessing in disguise in that instead of suffering a loss, the team had an okay, and then a shaky performance. And that kind of woke the team up from there because the level of focus and execution here these 2 weeks since he came back is way ahead of where it was the previous 3 while he was gone.
It's such a backloaded schedule. Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State at the conclusion. If Maryland turns out to be any good, they're certainly the 4th best team in the division. But Purdue, at least in my estimation, that's the best offense Michigan is going to face until week 10. Like this should not happen in college football.
I don't know how many other great offenses there are in college football this season. I don't. I think Notre Dame has a very good football team. I don't think they have a great offense. I think they have a very good running game. I think their receivers are pretty pedestrian. I look at, I guess West Virginia, if looking at Penn State's the best offense they've played, would they, would we favor them to win the Big Ten West? Or would they be kind of in a hodgepodge of teams with Iowa, Wisconsin, probably the latter? I mean, there's not a lot of great offenses in our league this year. I mean, if you look at the NCAA quarterback rating, J.J. McCarthy is 30 points higher than the next Big Ten quarterback, and that's Talia at 25. Why is that different for people that don't know than QBR? QBR is factored. I prefer QBR, by the way, because it's more like the NFL rating system, but it accounts for the running stats too, and what you add to your team in terms of efficiency and effectiveness with your legs, which is a big deal in today's college football. That's why I think QBR is better. But if you look at the NCAA's rating formula, I think JJ, I want to say, is 7th, and then the next highest rated quarterback, I want to say Tali is like 25th or 28th. So I don't know how many great offenses exist in our league this year. I don't know how many great offenses Penn State's going to play. They'll play 2, and then we'll see how good Maryland is.
And as I understand it, QBR also goes to this level that it takes into consideration the situation of the game.
Yes. Yeah.
And that, to me, that's enormous.
The NCAA efficiency is literally just the formula of all your stats, regardless of garbage time or any of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I agree.
And so just think about it. A 2-yard completion's a 2-yard completion in your quarterback rating. But when it's 3rd and 1 and the game's on the line, you complete a 2-yard pass versus it's 3rd and 25, you complete an 18-yard pass. Well, it meant nothing. Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Higher leverage situations. Good point. But you talk about great quarterback play. Let's go out to the Pac-12 for a number of reasons. Obviously, the irony that this is the last season of the
Right.
Pac-12, and it's the best season of the Pac-12 in for a long, long time. And the quarterback play is just outstanding. Now, most of those guys will be off to the next level when they enter the Big Ten. However, I watch some of these games and just think, can I really envision USC on the field with Minnesota or Oregon on the field with Iowa? Because I think the offensive minded folks would run to, well, Minnesota's going to get blown off the field. Iowa's going to get blown off the field, but it's not that simple. They play legitimate defense, not necessarily Minnesota this year, but what is that going to look like? Those mergings of styles.
I think that if you have, we're talking about a league right now where Cam Ward at Washington State, Jaden Delory at Arizona would be, Cam Ward would probably be no worse than the third quarterback in the Big Ten behind JJ and Talia probably. You'd probably, Jaden Deloria would probably be no worse than what, tied with Kyle McCord probably at fourth in the league right now. Okay. But certainly somewhere in the top five, and so that just goes to speak to the overall depth there. I think that, I think it'd be a bit of a mishmash. I think that the Big Ten teams the legacy Big Ten teams you talked about, because you're talking about other teams that are going to become Big Ten teams next year. The legacy Big Ten teams would you learn this in basketball. It is much easier to slow a team down than it is to speed them up. And so I think that they would be able, on some level, to get them into a mosh pit for a while. But I also think when we're talking about, the Minnesota's quarterback up until this week have been pretty bad, frankly. And when you're comparing him to Michael Penix or Caleb Williams, guys that are going to be first-round draft picks, Bo Nix, who at worst will be a second-day draft pick, you can maybe drag them into a mosh pit, and then you're still losing like 27-10, 28-14. And there was never really a feeling that you were going to win the game. You just held them under, like Ken Palm in a college basketball game. You just tempoed them under their analytics. This is a league similar to, but this time it's going to work both ways. When Urban came in, he forced the rest of the league to up the ante when it came to aggressiveness on the recruiting trail, for example. I remember Brett Bielema whining about Urban still recruiting kids that were recruited at other schools. I don't know that Michigan would have done what it took to bring Harbaugh in if Urban had not gone to Ohio State first. Now I think what's going to happen is the rest of this conference is going to have to get better recruiting and developing quarterbacks. And those other teams are going to have to get a lot better at the line of scrimmage, because I think eventually what will happen is they'll cancel themselves out, and you'll see the teams that can put a good quarterback on the field and maintain at the line of scrimmage, which are the top three teams we're talking about this year. They'll be the top three teams next year or the next few years. I think a real challenge, if you're an Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan State program, you got to consider that to even make the Big Ten championship game starting next season, you're going to need 5 of the following 6 teams to not be a top 10 team all at the same time: Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, USC, UCLA, Oregon. Now, I looked at
Washington.
Washington's had some really down years. That's why I didn't put them in there. But yeah, you could put them in there too. I just looked up those 6 teams, and I found only twice in the last decade that 5 of them were not top 10 teams, and one of them was the COVID year, so throw it out. Okay? That's just to make the conference championship game. That you need 5 of those 6 teams to not be top 10 teams. Good luck even winning the thing. So I think that you're going to have to be able to recruit and develop the quarterback position in our league, similar to like what a point guard does for you in basketball. If you're an undersized team, but you can control the game and the tempo with the guy with his ball in his hands. I think that's what programs like Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Iowa that have been very solid programs in our league for a long time, I think that's what they're going to have to do moving forward. And I think what'll be fascinating for their fan bases, what does Iowa fan do when 8-4 doesn't matter anymore because it doesn't mean winning a division title? And as devalued as the bowl games are now, they'll be even more so in a 12-team playoff, even more so. And so what's a Wisconsin fan do when 9-3 doesn't mean winning the Big Ten West anymore? And you're not in the playoff. What does that mean? I think those are things those programs are going to be wrestling with for the foreseeable future starting next year.
Yeah, it's going to be an ugly optic if the entire league is in one division and teams like Iowa are finishing 8th in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I was just, me, I try to see things as objectively as possible. Just off the top of my head the other day, forget all the issues with the administration, which is hard to forget. Let's just look at Michigan State, notwithstanding the current mess of its administration. But if you were ranking the jobs in the Big Ten, just even without that, what are they, the 9th or 10th best job in the league?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's where we're going. So good luck.
Where's the SEC going? So all these games that the SEC has lost out of conference, they have been the favorite. And the recruiting rankings still line up with everything that the SEC's been for the last 15 years, dominating the sport. The NFL draft, the Big Ten was catching up last year, but the SEC still for a zillionth year in a row, like 17 consecutive years, still at the top end. So the influx of talent, the outpouring of talent to the next level is still what it's been. But this league, if you just base it on results, and for my money, there aren't enough results, but still not winning the games that they typically win, losing all of the games that are marquee matchups.
I think what we just discussed with the Big Ten and what you just raised with the SEC is why by the end of this decade, if it won't be when this playoff contract comes up in 2026, it will be when the next one does. I think you'll see them go to a 16-team playoff, and then it'll be capped permanently there. The caliber of schedules people are going to be playing, Mark. I mean, we're going to have teams power rated in the top 10. They're going to be 8-4 in those two leagues. So we're going to we're going to have the group of 5 team go in every year in a 12-team championship playoff and get annihilated. But, look at Michigan next year. I'll just pick on my own team. Let's look at them next year. All right. You have Texas, the second game of the year. You have USC on the schedule, Ohio State on the schedule. I mean, they could lose a lot. They could bring back a lot too. I think Michigan has figured out how to use NIL and maintain locker room cohesion. You don't give money to a bunch of 17-year-old kids. You give it to 23-year-old men that you want to come and stay another year, who are already grown-ass men and can handle it and are fully physically and ready to develop, But that's where they spent a lot of their NIL money last year to bring Zach Zinner and Blake Corum and Trevor Keegan and these guys back. I think they'll do that next year. But let's say it's not successful. Let's say they have a national championship team and the Bears and Chargers are both open. One of them finally gets smart, hires Jimmy. We're kind of starting all over. I don't know. They could go 8-4 next year and still get a couple of quality wins, be power rated like 11th or 12th in the country. And they're not even on the playoff bubble because they went 8-4. I think you could say that there's going to be a lot of years you're going to say about teams like Oklahoma and the SEC, Clemson when they join the SEC here soon. And that's why I think you're going to see them expand to 16 teams in order to combat that. And it'll be like the FCS playoff format is. And that'll also give you an extra round of games on campuses too.
Do all Michigan fans call him Jimmy? Like, I wouldn't be allowed to call him Jimmy, correct?
No, you can't call him Jimmy. Yeah. When he's winning, I call him Jimmy. In 2019 and 2020, I called him Jim a lot. Yeah.
What do you make of Deion Sanders at Colorado? He brings in 68 transfer players. He throws that together with 20 true freshmen, 88 new players to this roster. I think it's remarkable in week 1 against TCU. All the speed and space and all of that was a given. I knew that was along for the ride, but I saw a team, despite the defensive deficiencies, that at least didn't blow coverages, didn't commit penalties. They were buttoned up, a well-coached team. They carry this through. Then you've got the whole social media factor, people watching games that wouldn't normally watch games, almost 10 million for a late night game against Colorado State, the most in the history of ESPN. What do you make of Colorado and Deion Sanders?
I'm not surprised. One of my picks in my crystal ball, well, they're better than I thought they would be, was that he would at least triple last year's win total. Because I think there's a major, when you're dealing with young men at this age, belief is a major factor. It's a major factor. And they would believe in him. They would believe that things are possible for them. They would listen to him. And you're right. You don't see a lot of stupid mistakes week in and week out. I mean, look at the Oregon game. They just were completely and totally outmanned in that game. Look at the way they fought back last week against USC. So I think they'll probably finish somewhere around 7-5, 8-4. And I think in a few years, there's going to be, well, maybe only in a couple of years, because I think he'll have one great year at Colorado and then he's out of there. You know, I think what programs like Auburn and Florida State and others who looked at him the last couple of cycles, they saw the potential, man. But, you know, at that level of business, people are always afraid of face planting and play it really safe. And so they wanted a proof of concept. And so they're willing to let Colorado basically train Deion Sanders to be a head coach for him. And that's what's going to happen. They'll be extremely good next year. They'll challenge for the Pac-12 the Pac-12. I'm sorry, the Big 12 title next year, and they'll win 9 or 10 games, and he'll be gone to one of those top 15, 20 jobs in the country. And I think what the media has done to the story is unfortunate. And well, I was going to use an analogy, but I won't use it here. But it's in my other job, there are times that all too often that both sides, the media and the subject being covered, way overplay into the presentation or show business aspect of things. And it kind of overshadows the fact that substantively some good things are actually happening, because now everybody's positions and opinions are determined by what you think of the show that's up here that everybody sees. And, you know, I watched a lot of that Colorado State game. Frankly, I thought Mark Jones's broadcast was despicable. I mean, they did everything other than call Jay Norvell and Uncle Tom in that game. I mean, I felt like somebody should have asked Jay Norvell, hey, when'd you stop being a black coach? Like, you know, really, I just thought that entire presentation by Mark Jones and the way that was played out in that game, where basically Jay Norvell represented Carlton from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and Deion was Muhammad Ali, I just thought it was just really reprehensible. And that's overshadowed the substance of the fact that Deion's done a hell of a job building and coaching that football team.
Interesting that you bring that up. I had not heard that about the broadcast. I was sitting right here during that game taking calls. We come on here after the primetime game. So I simply watched the game in silence and didn't hear any of that. But that doesn't surprise me. And certainly your analogies, Steve, are welcome here. We're not afraid of any analogies, so you can always deliver those here. Before we let you go, you know that there's a rather large portion of your fan base there at Michigan that thinks this Ohio State game is just check it off. It's a done deal.
Yeah, let me say to you what I say in my other job to people all the time. Twitter is not America. It is not real life. It's just not. Now I do think Penn State's the tougher game. But that's not a fate of Ohio State. It's because we embarrassed them a year ago, like badly, like really embarrassed them, and they get us at home. So I do think that's the tougher game because of those two intangibles. With Ohio State, yeah, I mean, we dominated the second half, but that level of motivation and hate is there every year on a perennial basis for generations, okay? It's very unique. What we did to Penn State a year ago is we just, you know, we took their manhood from them, really, and we ran for over 400 yards, just ran the ball down their throats. And so the circumstance of that, I think, makes it the tougher game. But if you're a Michigan fan and anything other than beating Ohio State by 1 point you find to be anything other than exhilarating, then I guess, you know, you were probably born in 2021, which to your credit shows you have a very advanced motor skills for a toddler. So congratulations.
I posted a tweet. I should send this to you, Steve. You'll appreciate, well, you won't appreciate this, but along those lines of what you just stated, this caused quite a stir for my little Twitter following. I basically summed up the rivalry this way. If you are 3 years or under, you have bragging rights as a Michigan fan. If you are over 100, you have bragging rights as a Michigan fan. Between 3 and 100, it's Ohio State. And boy, did I catch hell for that.
Yeah, I just don't get into that stuff, man. I'm sorry. I never really have. I'm not a smack talk guy. Just never been my thing. I'm kind of old school, like Barry Sanders flipping the ball to the referee, act like you've been there before.
You're a different version of a smack talk guy.
Yeah, I kind of think acting like getting worked up about beating you, and I just expected to, is even better, I think. I kind of think that's the boss move of boss moves. Now, I am a terrible loser. Terrible. I can't handle it at all. No matter what the competition is, I hate losing with a passion. But I'm not one to, if I beat you at something, I'm not one to, unless you come at me, I'm not really one to let you kind of know about it and make it nasty and personal. I'm empathetic. I know how much I hate losing, so I hate when people remind me that I lost.
Steve Deace, Michigan podcast. He's the best. And I would say, for as good as he is covering college football, you should check out The Day Job, because then you will learn about something real, something that matters, something that we should all get behind and back and support. Steve, thank you so much for being here.
You got it, brother. Go Blue. Thank you, Mark.